and hand over to Ayanda Billie, everyone. Please take it away. I hope we haven't lost you. Oh, just unmute yourself.
Thank you, Melissa, for the introduction. I'm sorry for the network. Hey, I don't know what's happening. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, you are currently hearing and seeing fine, so that's great.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. I'm Ayanda Billie. With poetry, I started when I think in school. My interest began when I was in school. One day I was in this meeting in school, and then there was a guy who just rose up and recited a poem. The poem was Africa My Beginning, Africa My Ending. And then I found out later it was Ingwapele Madingwane who was the writer of the poem. Since then, my poetry interest grew. And my first attempt of publishing is, I think it was early 90s. I sent a poem to the New Coin that I wrote. I sent it, and then Berold wrote back to me with a lot of notes and correction in the poem. And I think he said there in that long poem I wrote that there are only two strong lines. In that, I think it was 30-something lines. He said there were only two lines, that strong lines. I must work on those. And he gave me a list of writers that I must read. That's when I started developing, and I met Uputmkoli Sinyezwa in one poetry workshop that was in Port Elizabeth in New Brighton. And then I kept on writing, and by luck, some of my poems were published in New Coin, in Kotas, in Timbila, and the list goes on. And I'm still here. I'm still writing poetry. I'm still mesmerized by poetry. It still talks to me, speaks to me. When something that I feel so strongly about it, I write poetry because I'm not a speaker. I don't speak a lot. I speak in the paper. And I will start by reading a poem from this collection, South African Poems of Decolonization. I think it was published, this collection, in which year? I think 2021. The title is Your Poem Saved Me. In hours of strange dreams, the air was damp and motionless. It felt like the end of the world was near. My forehead touched the sky. In the sky, there is a moon. Her shape stops you and makes you see yourself over the high sea. From where I stand, there is a little girl dead behind Umgatri with a yellow dress and one earring. There is a funeral procession every weekend in Matanzima Road, accompanied by an eternity of hot tears. There is a non-stop music from the tavern, Jerusalem Ikayalam, frightening the birds, tormenting the stillness of the stars. There will be more and more dying, storm of stars invading the sky. And I remember your poem, Where Our People's Sorrows Are Buried. That's one poem, and I will read also one poem I wrote, I think, months ago. It says, it's a song also. It starts with a song. Ayechilwa manyange, ayechilwa manyange, ayechilwa manyange, sophelele ezizweni. Can we let the song begin so that the moon can recognize them even in darkness? And spring can add color into our streets. If death in our homes can if death in our homes can be smashed into pieces by a song, why do we silence the waves from rustling even when the rain falls? It's a song also. The next poem is On a Bench. I work in a factory in Volkswagen as an operator. Some of the poems, I write them when I'm at work, night shift, afternoon shift. This one is titled On a Bench. In a 30-minute sleep on a night shift, I had 22 dreams. Number of years I've been prostrated in overalls and safety shoes. My break time was full of dreams in pieces, counted by the cockroaches patrolling on a table for crumbs. I was woken at the beginning of another dream by the sound of the production line moving. Melissa, you will stop me if you think it's enough. I will keep on reading until
you've got lots of time. Lots of time.
Okay.
And your video and everything's perfect, so that's great.
Okay, no, that's beautiful. This one is titled Ekasi. Sunday night at 7 at evening, music blast of amapiano. At 9 o'clock, girls screaming. At 10 o'clock, police searching for a polo. At 11, gunshots. At 1 a.m. in the morning, dogs barking. At 3, footsteps on the streets. At 6, school transport hooter. At 7, workers at the bus stop drinking score. We gave ourselves. We had one child. When we had one child, we used to drive to the Western Cape twice a year. And we'll talk, laugh long, and listen to music that speaks to us. And stop in each town. Still today, Nice, our favorite, is made for resting and wild peace, to eat and buy some antiques. We gave ourselves to the road and the long silence that sometimes buried the music. We drove past small towns where we saw no one, only a tractor in the middle of a field. I've been meaning to tell you that everything I love about you, maybe it's those long drives that saved us. The next poem is titled It's Strange. It feels strange to wake up here, hear taxis from a distance hooting, to open the window, pull the curtains back, and see the sky gathering mutilated clouds, and the sun retreats. It's strange that the night always goes with a soul. A security guard was gunned down. This country does not want peace. It vomits pain. And I will read also from my book, Kwanobuhle Overcast. Written in silence. I do not have a title yet. It will only be 4 lines. I will read them on your funeral. Under the rotten star, only the sky is eternal, and the black earth that feeds us. Rest now if God has not forgotten you. I hope I won't break and not grieve for too long. Do the same for me if I kiss the dust first. A poem for you. Pain grows like a weed in the world every day, and this township has taken too much from me. I do not want the sky to weep for me and spaza shop to close. I don't want the cries to drag on. I just want the silence to stay a little longer. I'll keep my word. In the next 24 hours. I'll write a poem for you. A poem with an aroma of impepo, hummingbirds, and water. Finding love. This one is dedicated to my wife. I found love in a storm, in my country, in KwaZakhele, in streets that smell of violence, where terror rules. I lifted my arms to catch a shooting star. My eyes are satisfied. I find myself laughing at death and holding someone who comforts me without any regrets. And the next one is dedicated to, it's a poem about jazz, because I normally listen to jazz music, to Zimnawan, horn screaming. I feel your horn screaming. Vadzimu, vadzimu. Where noise is silence, screams trapped with a note from a bleeding heart, crowded with faces. Ingoma yako, I feel it in the air, combining restless souls in symphonic suits. Mayenzeke intando yako. A voice moans like a futile wind, leaving a soul lying on dust, one amongst many. Zim zim, this way I'm with you. The tears which hide the gathering of clouds. Zimology, in cold silence, your spirit crowds me. Your sense songs are the light coming through to a sad-eyed black man. Today, I begin to live. And the next one is for Mankunku. Mankunku. Mankunku called the stars. Yakalinkomo for what we lost. Mankunku called all the stars. He blew dust from the moon so that light will be there above us. So that light will be there to smile at us. Yes, we buried the pain, but it still hurt us. Into the first hours of the morning, Mankunku called the stars. I will check on this. Time for morning star dance. In silence, you dance barefooted, wordless in melodies of wambling birds, dancing in motions of an upright bass. morning star hovers above our dark pit, dancing to empty mystic yearnings, and begin once more to live. On a hospital bed, Mkhuluwa, we held the Somali shopkeeper with an okapi in a daylight with children inside. I look him dead in the eyes. We want money, Wena. With a pleading voice, he said, why, my friend? I gave him one hole in the chest. Who's your friend? Kwere kwere. I got mad. He fell. I rushed to the till. Now I find myself here in chains. Not even a single visit from my friend. Screams at the car wash. Okay, let me begin with this one. A letter from prison to Mzwandile Matiwane. Behind these 4 pages, I see your bearded face in a letter I found in a hanging letter box with the red stamp of the correctional services. I see the guards in their deep brown uniform, keys swinging on their waist, shouting your name at the visiting hour. I hear the noise of the gates opening, the guard leading you to the visiting room after searching you from head to toe, and the doors closing behind you. At the car wash, you drank a bottle of Commando brandy, only the 2 of you, while watching cars and staggering, drunk, humming a gospel song, and calling women passing by amagwicha and amahule. Later, you complain of a violent stomach. Before you fell on your face into the mud and lay quietly, they called you, your tongue hanging out, vomiting blood. You died that Saturday, your body tired of the torture. Numbers have dropped here. This car wash is not the same without you, and the rain won't stop. Is it you crying or the gods on seeing your bruises? Rasta, your absence has left the hole. Your shoes are too big to be fit. Others refuse your death, hoping to see you the next day, only to find your orange bucket of water empty. My eyes used to follow you when cleaning my car. I never trusted you. Sometimes I would be unkind to you. I still have your image hiding. I have not forgotten how you looked. Your dirty, sagging trouser and a rotten smell from your Nike Dickies. Must I go on?
It's up to you. You can read for another 5-10 minutes if you want to.
Okay. She waits. She paces up and down at the factory gate, sweating like a fighting bull, with one broken heel shoe in her hand. She is waiting to rip out the heart of the father of the child trapped on her back, crying helpless. He clocks out in a rush, in a blue overall, carrying a lunchbox and a Daily Sun paper in one hand. Booty, your child is also, this is your child also. What do you think he will eat? The man forces a smile. trying to calm the beast. He digs into his wallet and takes out Mandela notes without an utterance, looking deep into her accusing eyes. She grabs them, stashes them in her breast, leaving him frozen, his head spinning. He stands there listening to the footsteps of other workers, rushing to their own miseries. All they know. When men see Uqinga, they run away. They say he is possessed by amafufunyana, always dressed in rags, with acrid smell of human flesh, dragging black plastic bags through the streets wandering. No one understands what he always mumbles. All he says to those he meet, kuyacha, kuyacha, cima. Buyile. This one is a very short poem. When they hijacked me, I gave them the keys. I did not protest because I was asking God why in front of my child. Kwanobuhle overcast. I walk alone in your best streets without trees. Adapt to every season, change my mood if I could. Like a chameleon on a branch. Kwanobuhle, just for once, keep those who can make you a place to raise children. Not this sulfurous cage where we watch dreams suffocate. Everything is dying here. You were once the colorful stars until the floodgates open. You are no longer the same. You are like the one who's afraid of the sea to deny himself the fish to feed his children. Kwanobuhle, I wake up to live like a limping bird and smile at the four walls of an RDP house. Buyile. He was the breed that was touched by the humbleness of Sobukwe. So they came for him, ama comrade, necklaced him in broad daylight while children were watching. After 7 days, Ama Africa buried him when the sun stood still. When they fill the grave with the last scoop of the soil, anger evaporated, and the police were there at a distance watching with a smile. When one palm were raised, Israel to Africa. Later, Ama comrade came again to dig him out of his grave. In the presence of the police, they burned him in his coffin, screaming, Maibuye Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we unmute and clap for Ayanda? Bravo, that was really, really moving. And yeah, I think you are a storyteller with your poetry, which is really something special to behold. And I felt like you transported us with your words. So thank you so much for sharing and being here. if you're open to questions, then we'll have a Q&A session now. So anyone in the audience who wants to ask Ayanda something about writing, about poetry, about life, anything, you're welcome to either raise your hand or put your question in the chat if you're shy, or you can just unmute yourself and pop on as we go. Is there anyone to start us off? Otherwise, I'll start us off. So I loved your story at the beginning about the way you started with poetry and just having 2 lines. That's a more senior person said, this is all that's good in here. I think that's very relatable. And it speaks to the progress you can make when you put, effort into practicing something to get to the point where you are now, where you've got awards under your belt and, you're an established writer who's come up from that. So that's really awesome to hear about that journey. So thank you for sharing. I really enjoyed, like I said, Nana, the storytelling aspect to your poems and the way you bring us to your home area in your poems. And I wonder if you want to speak about why it's important to you to do that, or why that kind of stuff is what inspires you most, or anything around sort of the things you write about and why those things are the things that draw you.
Melissa, thank you for the question. First is, to me, I think poetry should speak about this era that we're in, so that others can be able, for example, the next generation, when they look back, they find traces of what was happening or who was here, like all the other writers, what they have done in the 70s, writing about that era and others. And to me, for example, where I grew up, because I'm living in the township of KwaNobuhle, if I don't write about what's happening around me, who's going to do that? Because I want to read about this township, about what is happening, about the brutality, about love, about the misery, about everything that is happening around ourselves in this era. And to me, I believe that if I read a poetry that is written by Melissa, I want to know her world, what is happening in a area, in her life, love, the frustrations she's having, all that. To me, I think that's what connects me to other writers. For example, if I'm reading a book or a poem about someone who's living in Spain, can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? Okay. For example, if I'm reading the Spanish poet, I would like to know about what is happening in that part of the world. You see, while I'm still here in South Africa, that's what I'm trying to do, to talk about my space, to talk about myself, my frustrations, all those who are around me, what are the workers talking about, our struggles, what we're happy about, all that, generally about my surrounding. That's, to me, that's a very important angle. I want to read or to write about this era, and to be honest, and something that is believable. I'm not sure whether I've answered you.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I think I also feel that way about poetry, so it's really good to hear you talk like that. And I think that truth, that honesty of you putting yourself in your place in your poems is what makes it so powerful, and why we connect so much to it. So yeah, I think keep doing that for sure. It really is important to write about our own stuff. Okay, then I've got a question from Jacques next.
Hi, Ayanda, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Jacques, I can hear you. Yes.
It's wonderful to have you in the room tonight. It's really a pleasure to be in the same room with you. I have a short question and then a slightly longer one. I believe that you write jazz reviews. I would really be keen to know where one can read where one can read your reviews, your writings on jazz. If I'm right that you write such things. And the Blanca thing, there's something extraordinary about your poems, is that you really challenge us to like some people who are difficult to like. You know, I'm thinking of the guy at the car wash. You miss him, but he also is someone who calls people names. Or the guy who's involved in shooting the Somali shopkeeper, and then you say, well, you end up evoking some kind of maybe empathy for that guy. And so I'm interested in this thing that you do in your poems, where something is, you reserve judgment in a way. You say, well, something is this, but it's also that. I'm very interested in that. I wonder if you want to say something about that.
Okay, thanks, Jack. I used to write for there's a paper for workers for NUMSA, it's called NUMSA News. I used to do music reviews there to review Abu Zimnawane albums, Omangungungos and all that. That's what I used to do. But the paper, I don't know what happened to it, whether it collapsed or what, it went with the Tripartite Alliance. I don't know what happened to the paper, but I used to write jazz reviews then. Going to the guy in hospital, on a hospital bed, that, like what I've said, is I write about what surrounds me, what I see every day. Not because I have empathy for the guy, who I feel I'm trying to tell that story. Because, for example, that poem, I was visiting a friend of mine in hospital. There was this boy next to him. He was in chains. There was a police officer there sitting, watching him. And then I got so interested. I asked him, why are we here? Why are you here? And then he told me a story that I robbed a Somalian shop, and then I stabbed the guy, and the guy died. And I wrote about that. I was looking at this boy. Now he's saying, I'm alone here, but I was with my friends. They are nowhere to be found. And here now I don't even have to mention their names, because I would be. That's what I'm trying to do in my poetry, to draw you the type of world that I'm coming from.
Yes.
At the car wash, for example, like I'm saying in the poem, that sometimes I've treated you unfairly. My eyes used to follow you when you wash my car. I never trusted you. But what fascinated more of me is how the people miss him so much, because the guy was good at cleaning cars. But when you listen to him and the things he do, such people, they stay in our memory. The unfortunate thing is there are things that you can't erase from your memory.
Yes.
And then when I'm in that mode, I have to write something. Like I've said, is no, I'm not a speaker. I like to write. When something happens, I write it down. To me, I think to get it out of my chest, I have to put it on paper. Not because I have empathy, and it's because the stories are always around me. The poems, then it comes and tell me, write about this thing, write about it, because some of the things, they come and then I say, no, I'm not going to do anything about that. But it keeps on replaying itself in my mind until I write it down.
Thank you. I mean, that's wonderful. And they refuse to be forgotten. We also won't forget them. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that one. Is there anyone else who's got a question or comment? I see there is a question in the chat asking about where people can find your collections. it's specifically your Xhosa collection, but I think that can apply to all your books if you have any info on that for people.
The Xhosa collection, you can get it from me or from my publisher, Mxolisi Nyezo, because he's the one who published my isiXhosa collection. You can contact him, Mxolisi, if you want the book. And also the English one, Ukwanobuhle Overcast, you can get it through me or Berold, Robert Berold, the publisher. You can contact. I think there are some shops in Cape Town that have there. I'm not sure of the shops. Someone can speak to the publisher or Robert Berold to check which shops in Cape Town that have the book.
Would you be able to pop those names in the chat there for Poppy to check?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Cool. And then give you a sec to do that. And then I see Patricia's hand up as the next question.
Thanks. Ayanda, I think I was very taken with your answer to Jacques' question about the compulsion to write it as it is. I think you succeed so brilliantly with that. I am in a completely different space now from anywhere that you are, and yet I was there with you so potently through your reading that I think that is a great triumph to be able to do that, to draw us in into the difficult bits as well as the celebratory ones. But I suppose it's just a small question. I mean, you mentioned work, night shifts and production lines. How does that fit in with a writing life? How do you balance them?
Thanks for the question. Since the fortunate thing about me is when you are working this shift, because I work at Volkswagen, in the plant here in Utrecht. And the fortunate thing is when you are working shifts, I think you've got more time on yourself, because if you're, for example, you are working night shift, you have the whole day to yourself. You can sleep and wake up and write and eat and take a job. It's one thing. And when writing is part of yourself, you write anytime, anywhere, sitting in a car park, sitting in a toilet, sitting, because I don't have that schedule of or timetable. I write anywhere, even when I'm watching the news, I'm sitting outside with my kids, or I'm at work, even working, I've a pen there. When something comes up, I just write it down. I don't have a schedule or a time that I will say I put it aside, but to me, by working shifts, I think it works more for me. It's my advantage.
Good to know. Thank you for that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, do we have any other questions in the room tonight? Douglas.
Ayanda, were you actually born in KwaNobuhle?
Yes, I was born here in Utrecht in KwaNobuhle, and then I think in the late 80s, when there was this political violence in KwaNobuhle, because there was a political violence, and then my mother took me. I went to live in New Brighton for 6 years. Yeah, that's when I started having an interest in poetry, when I was in New Brighton, because I was living opposite a library. I didn't know anyone there. After school, I come from school, and then when I have nothing to do, I go straight into the library. That's when my reading started, and the interest of poetry begins. I'm still living in the township of KwaNobuhle anyway.
Yeah. You would know Red House then.
The Red House.
The little town.
Yes.
My uncle lived in Red House.
Yeah.
So
Red House.
I have family buried there.
Okay, in New Brighton.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was astonished in, I think it was 2017, the first time I went back to, no, 16, first time I went back to Red House.
Yeah.
And we went to the little cemetery to see the family graves. And suddenly the cemetery had must have been about 50 new graves.
Mm.
And they were all the HIV. They were all HIV graves.
Mm.
And the thing, and I looked elsewhere in the region. And during that period, there was just this extraordinary, and I'm sure it must have been the case in KwaNobuhle and Dispatch and Uitenhage, this sudden wave of death that seemed to just go right through that area of the country from HIV. I was amazed. It was a very tragic thing to encounter.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad, but
Yeah.
what can we do? What can we do?
Do we have anyone else in the room who wants to ask or say something?
Jump in quickly there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have that hand. I've been battling with it. No, it's just to say to Ayanda, I've known him for a long time. I mean, first I completely enjoyed the reading. You know, I like the voice. I mean, the sound of your voice. I mean, like it sort of evokes so many things. You know, which I think it's what becomes really vital about poetry. You know, that sometimes it can sort of, you know, it sort of manages to evoke things and sort of and reminds us of things as well, you know, and takes us to places sometimes that we've never been to, you know. And I think your poetry, that's where the vitality of the human voice, you know, it's very, very paramount that every human voice should be freed, you know. I mean, with everything sometimes against these various voices, but still these voices should be freed, you know. They should be liberated, and there's so much going against the human voice these days, you know. And so I think like that's why I find that the poetry that you've read to us this evening, it's beautiful in that respect, but it represents also, you know, that aspect, you know, of ourselves, you know, sometimes that we don't necessarily manage to pinpoint, you know, zoom into, you know, and sometimes even find time to entertain and listen to. So I mean, I think like your presence and your interaction and your reading has been of tremendous importance. Thanks for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I'm sure we all agree that this has been a very moving and important reading, both in the reading and in the question answers. I think it's awesome to get to know more about someone and why they write, and we can see that you're an observer, and that makes you a poet because you're paying attention, and that is a real gift to have. So I don't know if there's any last questions or comments. Otherwise, I will wrap up this part of the evening saying once again, thank you so much to Ayanda for being here, for reading to us, and for sharing himself and his place and his world with us.